Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Data Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Nigel Ainscoe. He's the head of data engineering at Koodoo. And we're going to be speaking about continuous integration and continuous delivery within the world of data. And Nigel's in a really good place to speak about that. It's been a real focus across his career, and he's worked with many organizations, many different type of organizations where he's gone ahead and implemented this. So we're going to shine light on that. Best place to start is, as we always do, is maybe just a bit of a background about yourself, Nigel, and how you got into data, and go from there.
Okay, so I got into data a long time ago, before anybody had any notions of things like data engineering. But since about 1998, I started working with SQL Server around then. And since 2009, I've been working as a data consultant, delivering sort of data business intelligence capabilities for fast-growing companies in particular. And I've been working closely with senior management to deliver reliable and repeatable data delivery.
Okay, and what do you mean by reliable and repeatable data delivery?
Okay, so in software application development, we think about things like version control, continuous integration, continuous delivery as being the norm, or at least in successful companies we do.
Yeah.
Whereas in data, we've been lagging behind that curve for quite a long time.
In what sense does data lag behind?
So executing those three disciplines is a lot harder with data. If you've got an application and you deploy it and something goes wrong, you can just roll it back, and there might be some pain in it, but that's about all. With data, it becomes a lot more complex. You've got a lot more questions to ask, like, do you need to recover that data to a specific point in time? How long have you got to recover it? Have you got a day, an hour, 5 minutes? Does the recovered data have to be perfect? Can you stand a certain amount of data loss? So all those questions make it a lot harder. And because there's a lot of companies, they simply rely on their data engineers writing handcrafted scripts to deploy their changes, and they'll write these scripts, and then they'll try and check them, but they're written by humans, and they're subject to human error, which can make for some quite serious pain if you get things wrong.
I imagine not only just the errors that can happen there, but surely there's a time and cost to the manual side of it as well for companies.
Indeed, yes. As I say, you have to write these scripts by hand. Then you need to check them with other people. And I've been at companies where they've been doing that, and it's slow and tedious, and you find that you're lucky if you can do a release once a week, if you're lucky. Sometimes it'll be once 2 weeks, once a month, in those sort of situations. Whereas if you can get into the kind of continuous delivery mindset of doing smaller changes and releasing them quickly and automating that process, then you're in for a much better journey as a company. It's going to allow you to execute better.
Yeah, and are you potentially sort of over-egging the problem, I suppose?
No, not at all. I mean, the problem is hard, but there are tools available, and switched-on companies are already automating this stuff using tools from a variety of sources. A lot of the people I was working with Microsoft SQL Server, for instance, I was pushing Microsoft's SQL Server data tools tool set.
And how long's that been around, that tool, and when did this start?
It first The very first early versions of it were around about 2010, but it was really more like 2013, 2014 when it really became, it became a bit more mature and was ready for prime time in companies who would be able to actually rely on doing large data projects with it and deploying large Microsoft SQL Server data warehouses.
Yeah, and obviously when we started speaking about a potential, I suppose, area to discuss, this became very apparent that actually this has been a focus throughout your career. I mean, what's been your experience in actually going ahead and implementing this?
Well, the very first time I implemented it was in a small division of AXA Insurance, and it was as much for me as it was for the business, because at the time I was the only full-time data engineer in that division. We had system reliability engineers and system admins doing a lot of the kind of networking stuff, but I was down for doing all the database work. And because there was only me ready to check all the deployment scripts, I moved to using Microsoft SQL Server tools to make my job better and make my environment safer, because it was going to remove a lot of the potential errors that I could make in writing scripts that I'd got no one else to check them.
That's it. That's it. A lot of it from the conversations I have, a lot of people really enjoy that ability just to bounce ideas off of other people in a team, and it's less so. I suppose it does force you in a way to go out and try and research it yourself, which again, I think you've done a lot of in the background to try and make your life easier, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it did work. It did, it made my life a lot better. All my deployments were much, I mean, it's not to say I never ever made another mistake again, but it was an awful lot easier to get a handle on it and control it. Then about a year or two later, I stopped working with AXA for a while and started working with a large software house in Bristol called DBG, and they were providing data warehouse services to a lot of large blue chip clients, the likes of really big people like Volkswagen, Audi, Renault, TalkTalk, Ted Baker, big companies, and they were struggling to get releases out of the door, even with a team of it was about 8 or 9 data engineers. They were still struggling, so I started cajoling them into, let's try this out, guys. There's a fair amount of resistance, especially from the people who wanted to cling to the old ways.
You always get that whenever there's obviously change and new ways of doing things.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's people being a little bit scared to move away from their comfort zone, or potentially not sure if they're going to be replaced, but by whatever tool comes across. But
yeah, I think there's a bit of both there, actually. People definitely don't like to go out of their comfort zone. I mean, I'm no different to that, and people do fear change for that. Oh well, if it changes, then I won't have anything to do. But I think really that's not true. Change is inevitable, but there's always new challenges, and I actually think the people who can handle that change are the people who are probably going to be better with the new challenges anyway, because that new challenge is then going to change again.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, I was there at DBG, and their delivery story was clearly fairly broken, and I got on quite well with the IT director there, so I persuaded him to let me use Microsoft SQL Server data tools on a new fairly greenfield project, and on the basis that it wasn't one of their really big customers, and we could always go back if we needed to, but we'd trial this and deliver it, and
It's a bit of a proof of concept thing, but you're actually getting to add some value.
Yes, it was a kind of a proof of concept, but with a real world customer.
Yeah.
But it did work, and that convinced a lot. It certainly convinced the IT director, because it was one of the cleanest deployments they'd ever had, and it convinced a lot of the other developers. And I think after we deployed that project, it was mandated that they would all new projects would be using SSDT, as we call it.
Nice. So must have done something right with that process. Yeah. Obviously made a difference.
Yeah. And that we would slowly, as we worked on older projects, we'd try and move them over to it.
Yeah.
And it's all worked. I remember the day when we switched over the VW Audi project, which was a massive data warehouse with I don't know, dozens if not hundreds of stored procedures and tables and things too. And it was hard work, but it all paid off. And I think DBG got bought up by a large American combine a couple of years later, just before I stopped working with them, or just after I stopped working with them. So I like to think that the improved deployment stories and their ability to execute their processes and get them out to new customers was part of
exactly.
It's
so key and so powerful by the sounds of it. And that's so. And what from a business perspective, how much of a commercial difference can this make? This type of project.
I think the bottom line is that because you can deliver change quicker and more reliably, it makes you more agile in the marketplace. So you can respond quicker to customers, and because you're providing a better service to customers, it makes your relationship with them more sticky, and hence it makes it more profitable, because you're giving a better service. It's harder for competitors to pull them away from you.
So many aspects to that. And are you still working with sort of SQL Server side now?
No. I carried on. So I carried on with SQL Server till a couple of years ago, and then I spotted this opening at a small fintech startup called Koodoo, and what they do is they power the kind of back end of most of the mortgage journeys on people like Compare the Market and Confused.com, people like that. When you go to their website, if you're searching for mortgages and getting mortgage quotes, that journey is being provided by Koodoo.
Oh, really?
So I took on the role of head of data there. And when I joined, their CTO had already decided that we were going to do a trial of a cloud database called Snowflake, who many of your listeners may have heard of. Some of them may actually be using it.
Yeah.
When I joined, I had heard of it, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah, it's become more and more popular, and obviously, from my perspective, speaking to businesses and individuals day in day out, it's something that's becoming more and more popular. Yes, there's not still a ton of people that are using it, but you do get the sense that it's going to be popping up more and more often. I mean, what obviously working with SQL Server for so long, what were the main differences for you? How easy was that transition working into with Snowflake?
Okay, so my first impression was that, okay, it's SQL. Most of the SQL queries I write seem to work the same, but there was none of the tooling luxuries that I was used to from the Microsoft ecosystem. So everybody who works with Microsoft SQL Server will know about SQL Server Management Studio. There's no Management Studio for Snowflake. Their main point of interaction is their web portal.
Is that just based on, sorry, is that just based on like the maturity of the, just simply not being around long enough for some of this stuff to crop up?
It is indeed. As I say, 2 years ago, there was hardly any tooling whatsoever. And that was something I'd got used to in the SQL Server world. Today, we've got a company called JetBrains, who some of your listeners may have heard of, who do they kind of built their name in IDEs in the Java and C# world. They have a product called DataGrip, which about 8 months ago or so, they've released a Snowflake plugin for that. So that gives an awful lot of the benefits that SQL Server Management Studio used to give, in that you can visualize the databases, you can write queries with good quality IntelliSense, you can use that to version control your queries and so on.
So I mean, what did you do then when you made that transition without all these tools, without the comfort zone side of it? Did you just have to research a lot of this yourself and try and see how to adapt?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, what we decided to do initially was that we would build the new data pipelines using custom Python and Go programming, and they have been very successful. They don't support the level of automation that something like SQL Server Data Tools does, but we're trying to, we've managed to work around that in the short term, but we're trying to look for better stories around that continuous integration and continuous delivery than what we've got at the moment, and we're working towards that now.
And are you aware of, looking forward, I suppose, are you aware of the way things are going to go with Snowflake in terms of other tools coming up that can help this process? Because I imagine if this can be delved into a little bit more, it can make your life a lot easier, but obviously probably promote the product in terms of other people taking it on as well, if they're already doing this sort of continuous integration, continuous delivery piece. Yeah.
So where would I start with? So we're 18 months into our Snowflake implementation now, and obviously we've gleaned a lot of learnings along that journey. So a few months ago, I've been hunting around for something to improve on the manual scripting I've been doing. And a few months ago, I discovered a product called DBT, and DBT stands for Database Transform, and it's a product developed by a company called Fishtown Analytics in the US. It's an open source product, but they also have their own cloud environment where you can develop your data models and develop your pipelines and deployments. What you get with their product is a framework where you can get your data transformations into source control. You can set up those data transformations so that they can work in different environments. So if you've got like a test environment, a dev environment, a release candidate environment, and your production environment, you can set those environments up in DBT so that you're able to do your development there, develop your data pipelines, test them in your development, and then using they've got their own continuous integration platform. So once you can do that whole Git code reviews, pushing your branches into the next branch for delivery, and make that trigger your deployments to kind of higher level environments, if you like. So you can push it from, once you've got it working in dev, you can push it to test, and then you can let your test people get at it and do their bit. And it also supports, as well as development and CI, it also supports being able to implement tests in your actual development environment, which is something that very, very few data tools do these days.
So it could be big, and the fact that maybe there's not many choices out there as well that apply, that would be used in a Snowflake environment, it's a chance to lead the way with it a bit.
Yeah.
I think sorry, Karen.
I was going to say it's certainly being picked up as a product by a lot of big customers. They've got a massive ecosystem of they've got their own Discord group, or multiple groups, their own Discord server with lots of different groups for Azure implementations, AWS implementations, GCP implementations, all the different kind of areas. And an awful lot of companies are picking it up, and I can see it becoming kind of almost the de facto way of developing for Snowflake environments.
That's cool. So, I mean, what I'll do after I'll post the episode as well, as I will put a link or something to that tool so that people can check it out as well. I mean, at what point does a business, it gets to a point where you're like, right, let's invest in continuous integration and delivery? It's obviously is an investment as well, because you've got to get the right tools, you've got to get the right expertise in-house to do it. So is there a certain moment and a certain size or scale of business that it makes sense for? Or
okay, I would say if you're in any data environment, whether it's SQL Server or Snowflake or Amazon Redshift or whatever, it's like the old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now.
Yeah.
So I would say, if you're a business and you haven't started yet, you should start now.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to do everything at once and immediately become an Amazon or Facebook and be automatically deploying thousands of times a day. But just that, getting that discipline into your business of having your database stuff under source control, integrating development code into that regularly, and doing small deployments, whether those final small deployments are done manually or whether they're done through a continuous integration platform like, I don't know, Circle CI or Azure Data Ops or something. It doesn't really matter. It's getting that discipline in.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do the continuous integration, and we do semi-continuous deployment. We have kind of automated deployment into our dev and test environments, but there's still that big red button that somebody's got to press to say, yeah, we're ready, push it into production.
Yeah.
We've not quite plucked up the nerve to push all our deployments automatically through into production yet, but it's something that we're aiming for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, across, like we said, we have many years of doing this type of thing in multiple organizations, different environments. What have been some of the, I suppose, the key things that you've learned across that period, or potentially things that you do a bit differently if you were, which you probably will do again in a different environment? Yeah.
I think like any major business project, you need to get support from the executive team. Your data, I mean, all businesses, well, pretty much all businesses nowadays are data businesses. It is the lifeblood of, or one of the things. It's like your cash flow management for finance, like developing new business for sales. It's an aspect of how a well-oiled business executes. But having said that, you don't necessarily need to get the support of the whole executive team. Maybe if like I did at DVG, for instance, you can get the support of the IT director or CTO or CIO or whatever the person who holds that position in your company is called. And you can get a smaller project approved to just prove the benefits. That's what it's like to be an easier start than just trying to get everybody to, trying to get the CEO and the whole of the board to pile in on it straight away. I think another thing which we kind of touched on earlier when we were talking about people not liking change is, if you're working in a team, you need to sell the idea to your colleagues as well. You need to get a good portion of them on your side, because you need that top-down support. But you also need some support from the people you work with, so that people have faith in what you're doing and don't try and torpedo what you're doing, because that can,
have you had that happen before?
I've had people make it difficult for me. People who have literally thought that because we're changing the way things are done so drastically, and they've been there for years and years and years doing it the way they've done it, that somehow that's going to take them out of the equation. And I think when you've got people like that, you need to sell them on the idea that this change isn't going to, it's going to take away some of the drudgery in their lives, and it's going to make their lives better, and remind them of the fact that the reason the company's keeping them is because they're talented people that they want working for them. And they're not keeping them because they're rubbish. If they were rubbish, they'd have got rid of them already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you touched on it there. I think it's about selling what you're doing to a business, selling it to your team, selling it to a CTO, whoever the leader is. And when you've got all the backing, that's great. But like you said, there's actually opportunities maybe when you've not got the full backing to start to prove a bit of a point, whether it's a bit of a proof of concept, it's something where you can add a bit of value.
Exactly. And if you're working, in your career, trying to improve your standing, if you can pull something like that off, it's not going to do you any harm in your career either.
Well, exactly that. And where have you turned to when it's come to increasing your knowledge in the area of continuous integration and delivery? Are there any key resources that you've used that you'd recommend?
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that we're also starting to use, particularly now that we're trying to work with DBT, we're going to need to change the way we do certain things in our database, and we're going to have an awful lot more things to manage, which can get difficult. So we've started using a product called Terraform, which again is another product that many of your listeners.
Infrastructure as code sort of thing.
That's the one, yes, infrastructure as code. There is now a Terraform plugin for Snowflake, which is fully supported. It's pretty much, it's certainly accredited by Snowflake, even if it's not actually written by them.
Yeah.
In fact, Snowflake have a tutorial on how to use it on their website, how to use Terraform with Snowflake on their website.
Oh, perfect. So good place.
Which I'll give you a link for that. So I'm going to be using that to kind of improve my best practices around security management and governance of installations. And if anybody's thinking of doing a Snowflake trial, I would suggest that they start using that from the get-go. It's highly recommended, both by Snowflake and a lot of their larger customers who are using Snowflake, DBT, Terraform as a combination. But turning other learning resources, if you've never done much continuous delivery before, and you just want to get up to speed on it, the book that kicked it all off was a book called Continuous Delivery by Jez Humble and David Farley, and that came out in about 2010. It's very application oriented. There's only a small chapter on data, but it is considered to be the kind of the standard text on the subject, if you like.
Yeah.
Another book that I think is really good to get you into the right mindset rather than focusing on specific technologies. It's something called the Phoenix Project, and that came out about 2013, if I remember rightly. And I would say that any data engineering practitioner who hasn't read it, they should go and read it now. It's not about continuous integration and continuous delivery per se, but it contains an awful lot of the foundational thinking around kind of version control, DevOps, best practices that as a modern data engineer you need to understand.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're in the SQL Server world, and I've only really got what I consider real commercial experience of SQL Server and Snowflake. I've used things like Oracle and MySQL and Postgres in passing, but I'm not by no means an expert on those. But for SQL Server, Microsoft have a whole section of their website on Microsoft.com on how to get started with SQL Server DevOps and continuous integration and continuous delivery.
Yeah.
If you could just Google Microsoft database continuous delivery and you'll just get pages of resources turning up. Yeah. Another company called Redgate Software operating in the SQL Server world, and they have a lot of good blog posts on their blog around the continuous delivery story. They provide tools to work with Microsoft's products, and they've also got their own ideas for different types of CI with SQL Server.
Perfect. Well, what I'll do after, like I say, when I post the episode, I'm going to list a few of those out in the comments as well. Really, really good, direction for someone who's maybe getting started in it, but also someone who can take it to another level as well. So, really good speaking to you, Nigel, today. So, really, say a big piece that you could dig into quite a bit, but I think you've given a good overview and obviously shared some of your experiences. But yeah, hopefully more and more comes out that can assist on the Snowflake side, because at the end of the day, I think it's going to be needed with how popular it's getting. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But yeah, really appreciate your time today, Nigel, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Okay, well, it's been great to talk to you, and I hope we've given some value to your listeners and viewers.
Definitely. Thanks, Nigel.